Hello and welcome to Wacom Manga and Anime Days 2021. Thank you for joining us for this last session, third session of the first day of this online event dedicated to all things manga and anime and a whole lot more. My name is Jeroen and I'm happy to be your host and moderator today. We're thrilled to have you here again for the session because when we started Japan Online Week about a year ago, we could not have imagined that this would turn out in such a nice and lively community. This event is brought to you in collaboration with our partners, Pixiv and Clip Studio Paint. And this session with Jose Vega is all about career talk. But before we jump into the talk, let me share some of the basic housekeeping rules with you. Our session will last approximately 1 hour with a dedicated Q&A session at the end. We will be keeping an eye on the chat, so feel free and send your questions anytime you wish. With so many people in the room, we probably won't be able to answer all the questions, but believe me, we will try our best. We are all here to learn from the experiences of our speakers, so please be kind to each other and do not spam the chat. We see you socializing and sharing your art accounts on the chat, and we really like that. That's why we keep the YouTube live stream running uninterrupted for 10 hours a day. This will give you heaps of time to connect and socialize with each other and creators around you. But during the session, we kindly ask you to keep the chat clean for session-related questions and commentary during the presentation. This talk is being recorded and will be shared on the Wacom YouTube channel in the next days. Let me continue with a brief introduction of who we are. Wacom has been around for some odd 40 years, and we are the pioneers of digital pen input technology. So whenever you want to create on your computer and you realize that using a mouse or a trackpad just doesn't cut it, you should try using a digital pen. But we would not be here without our partners Pixiv and Clip Studio Paint. And those of you who have been following our online sessions in the past months, you probably noticed our growing partnership with them. Pixiv is a social network platform for artists that focuses on communication through their artworks. It was launched in September 2007 and specializes in artwork publication and communication based on the concept of make creativity more enjoyable. They have now over 50 million users and going strong. You can visit and join the amazing community at pixiv.net/en. Clip Studio Paint, our other partner, is a versatile graphic software best suited for drawing and painting to create a wide range of content. With a wealth of unique features, it helps to create anything from illustration over comics to concept art and even animation. No matter if professional or hobbyist, Clip Studio Paint's natural drawing feel is loved by artists around the world. Now, one more thing before we start. If you're based in the UK or EU, we have an amazing offer for you. Please visit our Wacom eStore and use the discount code MANGA20 for a discount of up to 20% on a wide range of Wacom products, including Wacom One, Wacom Cintiq, and Intuos and Intuos Pro. For those of you who are outside of Europe, please check your local Wacom eStore or dealers for ongoing promotions. All right, time to start. Today we have Jose Vega with us. He's born and raised in Puerto Rico. He's a senior concept artist at Wizards of the Coast, working for the world building team for Magic the Gathering. He's a former lead background designer for the Netflix series of Castlevania and worked as a freelancer for 10 years with companies in video game, animation, and illustration industry. And I'm sure he's got a lot of insights to share with you today. So let's bring him on and start the session. Enjoy, and we see each other and hear each other later for the Q&A.
All right, great. Thank you. Welcome everybody. Again, my name is Jose Vega, and I'm super excited to be here today and just try to share, my story and, everything that I've been through in the industry and share with you guys as much as possible and as honest as possible as well. And so I have a couple things that I want to talk about in specific, but I want to start with sort of like my story, because I think it's it's going to be pretty relevant and a key factor to, why I am where I'm at, and the things that I went through and all that. And so the thing that I ask from you guys is that you ask as honest as possible your questions. I remember when I was starting out and I had an opportunity to ask questions, I wouldn't be super honest with my question. I wouldn't be too direct with my questions, and sometimes I could sort of leave a space to not get the answer that you need or that you want, or etc. So when you ask your questions, please feel free to be as honest as possible, and I would try my best to answer them as honest as possible. So again, I was born in Puerto Rico, which is an island in the Caribbean, and I wasn't really the artsy kid. I was always into like sports and video games and all that, but I never really draw when I was a little kid or anything like that. My first, if I'm not mistaken, my first introduction to any drawing at all was when I was in senior year. I actually had two of my best friends back then, and they were really like into anime and all that, and I really didn't know anything about that back then. And they sort of introduced me to like Dragon Ball Z and Rurouni Kenshin and all these old animes, and they will actually they will freeze the frame, or they will find a picture and they will actually just draw those frames, like the character, and we'll use like number 2 yellow pencils and some crayon color pencils to do a little drawings for that. And so they would teach me like which color pencil to use for the skin and all that. So that was really like my first introduction to like anything anime or drawing at all. And so during that year, we will always get together and play video games and draw a little bit and all that. But we had sort of like a presentation where we met with an institute in Florida that was teaching animation. And so we sort of decided all three to sort of go there and study animation. And long story short, what happened was on the close to the day to us living there, they decided to stay back home, Puerto Rico. And since I'm a stubborn person, I was just like, I'm just gonna go through it. No idea what to expect. And I went to I moved to Florida when I was 17 and started a bachelor's degree in animation. And because I'm from Puerto Rico, our first language is Spanish. Not English. I had to take like, I think my first year was just taking like normal English classes because I didn't know much English either. Which, thinking back, I have no idea why I did that, but I could barely form a sentence in English back then. And so I took like English classes and like regular drawing, very basic classes where you just draw a sphere and shade it and stuff like that. Learn about the tools and like the different types of pencils and all that stuff. But I wasn't really, looking at that back then, I wasn't really too into the art form of creating art. I think I was just there for mostly the idea of knowing rather than I actually love this, right? And I realized that like way years later, but back then I had no idea. And on my second year, I got introduced to 3D, and to me, 3D was like a very, it's very technical. You do A, B, then C, then D, and then you get your result type of thing. And it was really easy for me to sort of pick up. I could see results in a short amount of time, and that sort of stuck with me during those next couple of years. And I just sort of concentrated on that. My portfolio was mostly like 3D stuff, like basic little interior scenes and stuff like that. And so all my friends were like really good at drawing because they've been drawing for like years and stuff. But I would look at the drawings and I'm like, I would never be able to do this. So I just stuck with like 3D stuff because it was just easier for me. And when I graduated, I got a job. I was lucky enough to get a job right out of college doing 3D architectural visualizations. And what that means is that I was working with an architect, and he was also an interior designer. And I would read his drawings, and I would create those houses or buildings or interiors in 3D, so we could actually show that to the client and say, this is how it's going to look before we build it. And they will approve it, change materials or the couch or the color of the walls, or whatever the case may be. And I sort of fell into that industry for I think it was about probably 4 years. And I worked at that firm all that time, and it was pretty good. I was still just doing that job, play video games. I wasn't really drawing that much. Like I would paint here and there in Photoshop, just whenever the urge came. I wasn't really consistent in that. And I remember I used to collect concept art books. Like every time there was like a game that I like or a movie or something, I would always go to the bookstore and try to get the actual art of that. And I would collect it because I just love looking at the actual concept art of that IP. Like I remember when Darksiders came and I bought that book. That book was like really, really thick, and I think it was like the biggest book that I got back then. And it was like full of like sketches and concepts and like really rough stuff that I never I saw it a little bit on other books, but most of the time they sort of clean all the really rough stuff and they'll put it in the actual like final art book, just because it's quote unquote ugly. But this one had like a bunch of explorations and sketches and all that. I was just like super fascinated by that. And it was like really thick. And I always look at those books and I was like, man, I wish I could do this. I wish I could do this. But I never really act on it, right? And so after 4 years, the whole recession thing in America happened, where the economy really went down by a lot. And a lot of businesses, were affected by it. And one of those businesses was the one that I was working in. And I got laid off of that job. And I didn't know what to do. So I was like, okay, I don't have a job on this. I could work on a lot of things because I would, I work on restaurants and, personal trainer and all this other stuff. So I started working in a restaurant, and I had a friend that was working for the chief of police that, in that county. And I was like, I'm just going to become a police officer. And because I was into martial arts and fighting and all that stuff, and I actually like the whole military type thing. And I did all my tests for the police, and I did all the physicals. I passed them all, and the psychologicals and all this. And I was sort of like waiting on the approval, because it's a very long process for that. And long story short, I couldn't wait anymore. I had to move to California. And the night before I moved to California, because I was driving there, I got the letter of acceptance for the police. But I didn't have an apartment. I was already packed in my car. There was no turning back. So I was like, well, this is not happening. So I threw the letter away, and I'm glad I did. But then after that, I moved to California. I stayed there for like a year. And that was like the lowest. I still wasn't doing like any art, or any job that I had wasn't related to art. And I was on my mid-20s already. And so that was like the lowest part of my life during that time, during that year. I lived in my car. I was pretty much homeless for a little bit. And I was in really bad relationships. And my uncle took me in, and my family from Puerto Rico called me, and they told me that one of my grandmother dies. She was very old, and they told me to go there to visit them and stuff. And when I moved back, when I visited, I was with my family that weekend, and they say, why don't you stay in Puerto Rico? There's nothing going on over there. And that sort of like clicked with me, because I was literally like starting from zero. And I decided to stay in Puerto Rico. And if you don't know anything about Puerto Rico, you know, Puerto Rico is a very small island. There's really no industry there to like work on video games or make a career out of it, you know, from there. And but I still wanted to try this whole concept art thing once again, since I was starting from scratch again. And I'm gonna put a slideshow here on some of my work that I've done in a couple of years while I work or while I talk to you guys. But what happens is, you know, I was starting from zero, and that um, sort of led me to concentrate on this, you know, as much as I could, like never before. And you know, I was like, I became like literally like obsessed about it. You know, I was doing art as much as I could on any free time that I had, and and that meant literally at what point I had like 2 to 3 jobs that I was working. Like I was working at a restaurant, serving food. I was working at a gym, and I was also working as a sort of like a seller for like products for like gyms and stuff. So I would go to like different gyms and sell products. And I was working those jobs, but you know, I would wake up in the morning early. I would watch. Back then, I was watching Feng Zhu with his Design Cinema YouTube, which I always mention it because that was like the catalyst for me to like start this whole thing. And I would, you know, he had like 20-minute videos, 30-minute videos of just concept art stuff, related stuff, and I would watch one in the morning. You know, go to my all the jobs that I needed to do that day, and then I would come back home and during the night. And before I go to bed, I'll watch another video, even though it feels like repeated, because I would repeat them, and then I would practice that. And I did that for like months and months and months and months. Like I didn't do anything else. And I was never the going out type kid anyway, so it was sort of easier. And I was living with my parents during that time, and I did that for many months, and I started seeing a lot of improvement. And little by little, I started seeing, okay, if I'm getting better at this, the more time I put in. It was just like a mathematical equation for me. If the more time I put in, the better I'm gonna get. So like any other skill, the more time you put in, the better you're gonna get. And so that sort of stuck with me, and sort of I became like obsessed with that. And sort of I was just, every single time that I had free time, I would just do it and do it. And in 2012, December 2012, I got my first freelance gig, pay gig. It was from the guys at Fantasy Flight Games, and it was for, I believe it was for Warhammer, for one of the Warhammer's tabletop games that they had with some couple of illustrations and stuff. And when I got that job, like everything changed, because it wasn't like it was a lot of money that I could live off for a year, but it was just like a product of the work that I had put in, you know, those 2 years that I had before. And so the more I accumulated those jobs, the better I was getting. And so after that, it's just, you know, I started getting little jobs here and there, and more jobs. And, you know, I was working non-art related jobs, and the more art jobs that I was getting, I was living, you know, I was doing less and less of the other jobs, so I could, you know, live off my art. And so it was sort of like a transition for like maybe 2 to 3 years till I become like fully freelance, that I could live off my art like completely. And I did freelance back home for about 5 years before I got my first in-house studio. And but the first 3 years, 2 3 years, it was mostly like sort of like part-time, while I was, you know, getting to know more clients and getting better at my artistic skills, and, you know, just getting more clients and more clients, that I was able to live off my art completely. And after 5 years, I got the opportunity to be considered for the background, like a background designer for the Netflix Castlevania series. And the studio, it's in Austin, Texas. So I had to move there. but that was in September 2017. And if you guys don't know it, during that month, Puerto Rico got hit by two like super major, probably the biggest hurricanes in the recent history in Puerto Rico. And I couldn't leave the island. You know, there was no power for months. You know, water, food was really very little. You know, I remember we had to make like, I think it was like a 12-hour line for like a gallon of gasoline. And a lot of people at the end couldn't get any because they just ran out of gasoline. So it was like a really desperate time for you know, the people there. And I was trying to leave the island so I could actually, you know, get into this job. And they were good enough for me to wait because they knew the situation. And the way I got out is that one day I got a call from a very old friend from back when I was in college, and he's living in Florida, and he told me, hey, you know, I know what's going on in Puerto Rico. Are you guys okay? They were like, you know, I was like, yeah, you know, under any circumstances, you know, we have food and water, so we're okay. But he said that his boss is sending a little 2-man plane to Puerto Rico to bring water to the island. And because there were a lot of people that had like private planes and stuff like that, they were using the private airport to bring supplies to the island because the main airport wasn't open. And so he said that he had 2 seats that he could take 2 people out of the island into Florida. And he told me if I was like interested, and I'm like, yes, I am interested. I need to leave because I have a job, and you know, I really don't want to lose this opportunity. And so I talked to my wife, and he told me, okay, and that was like a really late in that conversation. And he told me, you need to be ready by tomorrow noon, and you can only bring like a backpack because it's like such a small plane. And I'm like, that's okay, and I don't need anything else. And so we met with the pilot. They bring all the supplies and stuff, and we got into this little plane. It was like a very small plane, and we flew to the Bahamas to get gas because he couldn't make it all the way to Florida from Puerto Rico. And then from the Bahamas we flew to Miami, I think it was, or Fort Lauderdale. And then from there, you know, we just flew to Texas, and then I started working. That's how I got to the studio, working on Castlevania. I became the lead background designer after a year, and then I led everything from season 2, 3, and 4. And that was still last year. And on January this year, I got the opportunity to work as a senior concept artist for Magic the Gathering at Wizards of the Coast, and that's what I'm doing. That's what I've been doing since. And that's where I'm at right now. So that's sort of like an overview of my story. You know, I really started, and I think this is important. I started taking seriously, like art seriously, like really on my late 20s. I'm 37 now, and I've been in the industry for like almost 10 years, since 2012. So I think that's very important because I know and I understand a lot of people, you know, they're maybe the early 30s or late 20s or mid 20s or even in the early 20s, and they're like, oh, you know, I might be too late to start in this whole art thing, and it's really not that late. You're still super young. But that's sort of like a general history of where I got to where I'm at. And so I think what I want to do now is just do like a round of questions that we have. I don't know if you want me to read in your own. Let's see.
Thank you so far. It's always beyond words if you dive that deep into an artist's career and the ways and how do you call it, the path to success and fulfilling your creative ambitions. One of the questions that popped up is, and that is related to that question, is how do you overcome those insecurities, and how do you motivate yourself to take that daring next step to actually create?
Yeah, thank you for the question. There's a couple things in there that we can definitely mention. I think, let me put one of these videos here real quick. So, well, let's talk about the whole insecurity thing, because that's something that I think is probably, I think, I'm pretty sure every single artist goes through that. There's nothing new about it. There's nothing special about it. You know, everybody goes through it. But it becomes so real when you're actually going through it. And I can actually tell you, this whole this feeling. I actually went through it very recently when I got this job at Wizards of the Coast, and my experience was that, you know, I always looked up to the work that was coming out of Wizards for many years. You know, I played Magic the Gathering when I was in college with some friends, and I always loved the art. And a lot of the artists that I followed, you know, they actually do art for Magic. And when I got that chance, and it was weird because I wasn't actually, during that time, I wasn't actually looking for a job, because I was pretty happy where I was in Castlevania and the studio and all that. Like I was very happy. I think I saw a post in Facebook, and it has been like a long time since I actually applied for a job, and that's something that we can talk about later. You know, it's been a couple of years since I actually applied for a job. Like all the jobs that I've gotten, it's just they just come now, you know, organically. And but this one, I think it was like a Facebook post or something. Somebody posted it, and I was like, I'm just gonna apply, just to see, because I used to apply before to be a freelance artist, and I never got the job. But this one was for an in-house position. I was like, I'm definitely not getting this one, because if I didn't get a freelance, I'm not gonna get an in-house job. But I did apply anyways, just because. And like a week later, I got the call, and I'm like, oh, this is happening. And so actually, when I got the offer letter, because, you know, after all the interviews and all that stuff, I still wasn't like actually believing. Like I'm actually thinking like this is actually gonna happen. I got the offer letter, and I got this really insecurity like feeling about it. And I'm usually pretty good about that, because I can rationalize all this stuff and think, and I try not to go with too much emotions when it comes to this stuff. But this time was like different, because I've looked up to them for so long, and you know, I got this feeling of there's a word for it, but I forgot the name of it. Imposter syndrome, I think is what it's called.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, the people that I was gonna work with is people that I've, you know, they're like, you know, people that I look up to in the art industry. And so to me, I have, you know, one of the things that I like to think about why the stuff is happening, right, within you, and like why. And so to me, you know, when I realize that, you know, it's because I look up to them and all that stuff, but, you know, I have to think also in a way of, for lack of a better word, in a business perspective, because if there's not going to be a situation where an art director or whoever's going to hire you is going to hire you just because they're good people and they want to do you a favor. Like that doesn't happen. You know, they're hiring you because you actually have something to offer to the company or to the product or anything like that. And it's not that like they're not good people. It's just like there's a process of the whole thing about hiring an artist and all that. It's because they actually see that you have something to offer, and they might see also like the potential for you to become better, but your base status is actually something that you have something to offer to the company or the client or anything like that. So based on that, you know, you already have, or to me, I already have enough information that what I currently bring to the table in terms of like artwork and you know, the skills that I'm bringing is enough for me to be hireable to this company. And that sort of gave me like a little peace of mind at the beginning. Like, you know, I wasn't thinking like, why are they hiring me? You know, like, I don't think I'm good enough, and that sort of thing. And that could be like super detrimental to like an artist, because you might burn some bridges because of that thinking. And I rather let's just, and this has never happened to me before, but you know, just to have this mentality of, I'd rather go through the job and doing the job that I'm not good enough, quote unquote, and leaving that job, or you know, or get demoted or get fired or whatever, than thinking I should have gotten that job and I didn't, just because I thought I wasn't good enough. So I'd rather go through that process of figuring out if I'm actually good enough, which I already know because I'm actually getting hired. That should be, you know, enough info for that. But I'd rather go through that process and than not, you know, for a thing of fear and insecurity. So that's how I deal with that. And you know, and there's a different scenario when that happens before you get through the job. Like, that was before I got hired. And the other like the other side of it is like when you're actually in the job and you're not performing like you should be performing. That's like another, you know, another set of issues that you're going to bring in. And that's also completely normal, right? Like, you know, sometimes you're going to have good days, sometimes you're going to have bad days doing art. This is not like a very constant thing that you're going to have. And it doesn't mean that, oh, you know, today I don't feel like I don't feel motivated, I'm just not gonna work. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. But sometimes you're not gonna produce as good art or as good great ideas as you did, you know, the week before, or the day before, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, so that's how I deal with that.
Yeah. We, as you can imagine, we get a lot of questions that are focusing on the early days of a career, because I assume that a lot of young artists are exactly at that point. Like, where do I start and how do I land my first job? And especially, how do I do that if I have no connections? What would be your advice there for people who have or think that they don't have connections? Should you just start reaching out to companies, or should you tailor your own skill set and portfolio to obvious needs and demands from individual companies, or what is the best way forward?
Right. So that's actually a great point. That's actually one of the points that I wanted to talk about, because I do have some like personal examples for that. I'm gonna talk a little bit in like a group of things I'm gonna say, but one of the things that I do, and you know, we always hear about networking and, you know, all this stuff, and all that is like, you need to do networking. That means, you know, going out and meeting to people, and I don't want to, like, I don't like saying that, because most people, and this is a mistake that I did when I was starting out, most people see it as a sort of like a business, quote unquote, translation. Like, if I'm gonna go to a convention, I'm gonna meet so and so, and I'm gonna have them interested in my work, and maybe they'll hire me. Happening. Like, there's so many great layers in between that I'd rather not see it as a sort of like a checklist type of transaction. It has to be a lot more organic, where you see this whole industry as a community, and, you know, you guys all share the same passions and the same likings, and you know all this same things that sort of put you in the same sort of community. So like one of my strategies was that when I was in Puerto Rico, I was always saving money to go to a convention or like a workshop type of thing once a year at least. I wasn't earning really a lot of money back then, so, you know, I could only do it like once a year. And but that was like a must. Like, I needed to go to one convention once a year. And one of those conventions was CTN, for example. And another convention was like Gen Con, and I would go to like different ones and different workshops and stuff. So that will give me the ability to meet people personally and meet people that, even though we talk online, like I will actually see them in person. But not only that, but we'll go to like do some light drawing at the event, and pretty much like just hang out. Just there's no really like a specific mission behind it. When I was meeting this artist and these people, they had like portfolio reviews and themes that are more specific like that. And I would definitely go to those, and that was like a specific sort of mission.
Yeah.
But for the other parts, it was very organic. And I'll give you an example. One year I went to Gen Con, which is one of like probably the biggest tabletop games conventions there are. I think it was like Indianapolis or Indiana, something like that. But I went there for the weekend because I had they were doing portfolio reviews. And I remember Wizards was doing a portfolio review, which I got into the portfolio review that year. And I only went to get my portfolio review from Wizards. That was like the main purpose of it. And there's like a bunch of companies like Fantasy Flight Games and all these other companies that had tabletop games. And I had my portfolio like on my iPad, my tablet, that I plan to go to each company and try to talk to the art director and show them my portfolio and stuff. But my main thing was like Wizards of the Coast, just because it was Wizards. And what I did was I did that portfolio review first. That was like the first thing that I did. And then from there, I just walked the room or the whole convention, just meeting each and every company and like each art director. And I will ask them, hey, I'm an aspiring artist. I would love to work for the games that you have. And, if you have a minute or two to check out my portfolio and let me know what you think, type of thing. And they normally would say, pretty open, and they'll normally say yes, right? And I talked to a bunch of them. And there was one art director from one company that I couldn't get a hold of her because she was like so busy with the convention that I just couldn't find a spot where she could actually see me. And I waited till like the end of the convention where everything was like closing down. And at the end, I saw her and I asked, hey, do you still have a minute that we can, you can see my work and stuff? And she was like, oh yeah, let's take a look at it. So she saw it. She was like, oh yeah, this is so cool. I think, I might have something for you, type of thing. And, send me an email when all this is over and, we can chat about it. The conversation lasted like 2 minutes. And I was like, okay, great. So I went back home. I grabbed all the contacts that I had that following week, and I sent a bunch of emails. And I didn't hear anything for like months and months and months. And sometimes what I do, like 2 to 3 weeks after I send the first email, like I send another email just as a reminder, because sometimes it gets lost, right?
Right.
And I didn't hear anything from that trip like 4 months. And the year later, the week before the next convention was going to happen, like that same convention the next year, like I got a reply from that art director at the end of the convention saying, oh, I'm sorry, it's been a year. I have some work for you, type of thing. You still want to work together? And I'm like, yes. So it's just crazy. Like, after a whole year of no talks, like she replies to that email, and, we started a sort of like a relationship type of thing, because I did a bunch of work for them afterwards for like years. But so that's what I did in terms of like meeting people and stuff. Like I will set up a budget to, in my case, I could only afford it for like once a year. If you can do more, that's great. But that was like one of my main things. Like I wanted to take care of that once a year. And another example is I've been a fan of Blizzard since I started. And one of my dreams was to go to a BlizzCon and just go to a BlizzCon. That was like one of my things. And I got the opportunity to go to a BlizzCon out of pure, I don't like saying luck because I don't believe in luck, but out of pure, just, it wasn't like a normal thing that I bought a ticket and I got it. It was like a friend of mine had a friend that had 2 tickets, and it was like something crazy like that. And I bought the tickets from them, and I created a specific portfolio for them on that time that I was waiting for that convention. So I was like, I'm just gonna create a couple pieces that I wanna show them, and it was like specific for them. And I would do that to like every company that I wanted to work with. I would create like a specific portfolio. And it doesn't have to be like a huge thing. It could be like 3 pieces or something like that. Just something that shows that you understand their IP, you understand their product, and you understand what they're doing. And so I did a bunch of card backs because I was like really into Hearthstone. I love the look of the card backs and all this stuff. And I did like a bunch of card backs, and I showed them to the art director, and we talk, and he said it was cool and all that, but really nothing happened. But what happened was that after that, because I had those card backs in my portfolio, I actually got approached by Hyra Studios, which they do Smite and do another game, but they wanted me to do UI design. There was a sort of like artwork similar to the card backs, but for Smite. And I did a bunch of after that I did a bunch of artwork for Smite, doing like UI design, like emblems and like achievement icons and that sort of stuff. So you just never know. You just never know what you're gonna get. You always want to try to do the best that you can on your end, and then let sort of life figure that out.
Right. I think that's super valuable advice. What you said earlier is also, if I understood you correctly, to sort of when you talk to people at a convention and other artists or art directors that are potentially people who give you jobs, to differentiate between chatting casually about art and pitching for jobs, so that it doesn't become too awkward for people involved. I find that very interesting because I mean, we as Wacom, we go to a lot of creative events, and you see a lot of people going through portfolios, and it usually becomes way more interesting when it's just an open, casual conversation, as when people are trying to push for something that is maybe not the appropriate time, or maybe not the right surrounding and stuff like that. And
yeah,
you sometimes really see really talented people missing an opportunity because they're hitting the wrong note. And that being said, it's nothing to worry about, because what we usually see is that the art scene is super welcoming and friendly and always interested in art. So you will always have this door open as a conversation starter, like, hey, do you want to have a look at my portfolio? Right? That actually always works if people have even just a minute of time.
Yeah, timing is it was one of those things where I learned after a while, because when I got to a point that I was hireable, right? Because one of the things that I wanted to mention was that when I first decided, okay, I'm gonna do art for a living, right? I needed to have this whole thing is skill based, right? So like any other skill, you start at zero. Some people have a more natural feel to it, so they learn those things faster. But you start at zero, and then you start putting time in, and then you get better and better and better. So, but there's gonna be a threshold point where you become hireable, right? And that time from zero to that point, the way I see it now, it's like that area you need to be as intense and obsessed about it as possible, because you want to get to that point as fast as possible. Right now, most people, and this is in my case, because for example, I was like in my mid-20s when I started doing this, so I had a sense of urgency. Like now I look at kids that are 18, 17, 19, and like they're doing artwork with the same quality that I'm doing, or sometimes even better. It's like like, I mean, they're like, they have so many years still to like to grow, that it's incredible. But in my story and my cards that I had on the table, I had to deal with what I had. So I needed to look that area from zero to that threshold as intense and obsessed about it. So I needed to get there as quick as possible. And from that point forward, which is where I'm at right now, is more intentional than intense. So I'm more intentional with the artwork that I'm doing, with the clients that I'm working with. Because before, I would take pretty much almost anything in terms of like freelance work, or any work at all, right? Because I just wanted to get to a point. But now I'm more intentional about the clients and the artwork and the skills that I'm practicing at. But timing was one of those things that before that, even if I had the skill to work at a company, the timing wasn't right for me to work at that company. And that could be due to so many factors. They couldn't have a position that really don't need your skills right now. Um, it could be so many things. And
Right.
that was like really frustrating at the beginning because I didn't understand that part. And like I would think to myself, like, okay, I have the skill, why are they not hiring me, or why I'm not getting this job? And it was just the timing part that is so important, that I needed to understand that, to be at peace, pretty much.
Right. We get a lot of questions around concept art, and we've talked about skills and building up your right skill set. What would be your top advice for people who are thinking of developing their skill set into concept arts? What is something that uh, people are looking for and expecting from concept art?
So so concept art is all about problem solving, and it's not really about making pretty pictures. And this is something that I actually recently sort of started seeing more and more, because the job that I'm at right now, even though the skills and the process that I use is the same as if where I was in Castlevania or any of the other jobs back, right now is a lot more about generating ideas and presenting those ideas visually. So, in my case, I try to be as efficient as possible with my time. So, um, I'll give you an example. When I was working in Castlevania, in the um, anime industry, as a background designer, sometimes we have, we have multiple locations in the show, right? Like you look at a show and there's like multiple locations, but sometimes we got to create, a numerous number of backgrounds for that specific location. So like if I have an interior shot of a castle, of the hallway, let's just say, for example, and I have a scene that takes, I don't know, there's like 50 shots in that area or location in the first episode, and then we go back to that area in, I don't know, episode 5, and we have 50 more shots, type of thing. Well, if I'm trying to do, if the studio that I'm working with is gonna try to do, let's say, 20 backgrounds or 10 backgrounds for that specific location, I'm not gonna try to do all those 10 backgrounds from scratch. Like I need to find a way to do these backgrounds as fast as possible in the shortest amount of time. And so when I was in Castlevania, for example, I started introducing more 3D in the pipeline, because in the long run, it would save us a huge amount of time for making extra backgrounds, fixing backgrounds in the post production part of it, and just for the overall communication of all the departments. I could send the 3D to the storyboarder, so they could actually have a more realistic space to work with. I could send that to the outsource company that they were going to make the rest of the background, so they could actually have the correct space. So thinking about those things not only helps you as an artist because you're creating more value to the company, but you're also helping all the other departments and everything as a whole. And so yeah, so
but it's this question actually popped up, and what you mentioned. So when you start a piece, do you actually start basically in 3D or very early right away, or when would you switch? And turning that into a career advice, how important are 3D skill sets in comparison to 2D, or where's the sweet spot in this?
So so this is how I treat it, and I don't think every artist treats it the same way.
Sure.
The way I see it is that I'm gonna use, and this is how I start. I'm gonna use whatever it is that I'm gonna use to get this thing done. So sometimes, like for example, literally this week and last week, we're doing a bunch of concepts for work and stuff. And a lot of them, like I'm at a current point where most of my stuff I start like stretch from 3D. Like I actually sketch in 3D. And so whether it's, by sculpting something or like just placing basic geometry on a scene type of thing, or, whatever the case may be, sometimes I just start in 3D because it's so faster for me that I can, I can add lights really quickly, so I can play with the lighting situation and see how that looks, or if I want a sunset or straight down light, or whatever the case may be. It's easier for me to experiment and get more mileage out of that when I'm using 3D than if I actually literally just draw it or paint it. But for example, I think it was yesterday or Monday, I was having a hard time trying to come up with some concepts for something specific that the 3D wasn't really helping. And as soon as I noticed that, I needed to change my tool set and change the carriage that I was trying to use to tell this idea. And so what I did was I literally went into what is this called? It's called, I forget the name, but it's a website that you can put a bunch of pictures and it just creates a random picture out of that. I forgot the name of it, but I started playing with that for like a few minutes, and I started getting some like just something. It's like when you're looking at clouds and you see like a vague form of something, right, and then your mind sort of fills everything up. And you say, oh, okay, this is a dragon or this is a dog or something like that. Well, I was getting the same effect with this process, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So I just started matching some like pictures that I had and just playing with it, and I got a couple of options like as a base, and I put those into Photoshop and I just painted over, and I did a bunch of concepts, and I did like 10 of them in like an hour or something like that. It was like super quick, and that way sort of helped me solve that problem. So I'm not really sticking to one thing when I try to work. Yes, I do have certain things that work for specific things, but I'm not really I'm not really a all 3D guy or all pencil guy or all Photoshop guy type of thing. Like I'm just gonna use whatever is gonna work for what I'm doing.
So it's basically a sort of photo bashing that you're doing.
Well, that's another technique. That's something sometimes what I use as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we get a lot of questions like, how do you overcome art block? I think that's a great way to get the creative juices going, actually.
That's one way to do it. For art blocks and stuff like that, like you have to look at what really is going on, because sometimes, like I think sometimes a lot of artists say like art block, and they're talking about when they sit down and whatever is in their mind, they can put it into their medium, whether it's Photoshop or drawing or whatever. And a lot of times when that happens is that you're still developing that skill of putting what's on your mind into paper. And that's actually like an actual skill that you need to like practice and practice and practice. It could be that you don't have you're not using reference, or you don't have a mental visual library big enough to portray what's on your mind into paper or Photoshop or whatever. And they see that as an art block, but it's not really an art block. It's just you're just early in the process, and you need to supplement what you lack with something else, whether it's by looking at reference, making more studies, just practicing more. It could be a range of different things. So the other thing also is like you might also be limited in your box of tools, right? So I have a bunch of tools. Like I have sculpting, I have 3D. I'm getting into VR, Photoshop, photo batching. Just plain old drawing. All these different tools that if something doesn't work, I can go back to my tool bag and use that. If that doesn't work, I can go back to my tool bag and use something else. So if you don't have a lot of tools and a lot of ways to express, it's like language, right? If you only know 5 words in a language, you're very limited to that. So the more words that you know about that language, the better you can express, what you're trying to say. So, so I see the tools as as language and as words that you can, pick and choose what you wanna use in order to express what you're trying to say.
Yeah, excellent example and way to describe that. Because the question for references always pops up, like how do I deal with references, and is it okay to use them and stuff like that. But what you mentioned, to use references to broaden your horizon and in your visual library is actually really good piece of advice. Thinking in that same direction, another all-time favorite question in our chat and in our sessions is, what kind of books and resources do you recommend for people who want to see, learn, and develop more? Do you have favorites or a reading list that you can recommend?
So, so I'm not gonna be your typical person to ask this with, because I'm gonna be super honest. I have never. I'm not gonna say I never read a art book, but I never finished reading an art book. Like I usually start and I sort of glance through it. I sort of pick some things, and then I'll get rid of that and start doing, because I mean, in my case, like I'm not much of a reader. Like it's really hard for me, and so that's like one of the skills that I'm still trying to get better at. But I don't want to say I can recommend you some books just because I heard they're good, and I know they're good because I know where they're coming from. Who made them. Like Scott Robertson's book are like, I know him as an artist, so I'm pretty sure his books are just amazing. The Color and Light art book. Yeah, this I'm not gonna mention like, yeah, because the thing is, like, I'm pretty sure everybody as a human, they have their own way to learn things and get inspired by things in many different ways, right? So I don't get inspired by reading a book. Like I just don't get inspired. Like if you take me to a trail in the mountains and you leave me there for like a couple hours, like I'm gonna come back like fired up, like I'm gonna be super inspired, because I just love that, right? So so I think it's very important for every single artist to be self-aware of what are the conditions for them to be at their best, in terms of like learning and all that stuff. And for some people, it's reading, sitting in a very quiet room, just sitting and reading some sci-fi or novel or something like that. They get super inspired. So I think it's gonna be different for everybody, and that's sort of like a self-discovery thing that I think everybody needs to go through with experience and figure that out as they go through. So yeah, that would be my answer to that. Just because I don't want to sit here and say, oh, I've read so many books, because I haven't.
Oh, it's a great piece of advice, because, wow, I mean, we had several sessions where people just turn around and pick a book from the shelf behind them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think going out and finding your environment or the scenario that inspires you and fills up your creative energy levels is I think that's the way to go, whatever it is then, right? If it's watching films, or whether it's going out in nature, or whether it's checking out other artist profiles.
And let me be and this is something that might be unpopular, but like I think a lot of people or I think a lot of artists and just people in general with a lot of different things, I think they don't have to do it, like, I'm pretty sure they don't do it intentionally, but I think subconsciously, when I read, or when this artist reads a book about composition, or color and lighting, or anything like that, I think they have a sense of accomplishment, that they understand what they read, but reading about it is not the same as doing about it.
True.
So like, I could read a book about composition, anything like that, but I rather, like, and this is how I do things, like if I want to learn something new, like I just glance at the major thing about what I'm researching for, and I put that aside, and I get to work. Like I actually do it, and I do it, and I do it, and I do it. And that's how I learn. Like I learn by by trying it and failing, and messing it up, and trying it. And that's how I've been learning for forever. And when I realized that, I'm not a theory guy. Like I need to just know a little bit about it, and then that's all I need, and I just put it into work, and I just continue on it. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of getting that sense of success, or it's like for example, like when people have goals, like I don't know if you heard it, but like some people say, if you have goals, don't tell anybody, and let the results of that goals, be the messenger of what you did, because some people, when they have goals, they put it on social media, and they say it out loud and all this, and then they get the sense of accomplishment because they said it, but then they don't you have a higher rate of not finishing it, because you already have that sense of success with it. So I think it's sort of the same way when people are trying to get 100 books on composition. Like you don't need 100 books on composition. You just need to make the basics and then put it in practice. But that's that's what I think.
We have a lot of all-time favorite questions.
Great,
but
let's get it.
As we're coming to the end of the session, I have one question for you. How many layers?
Oh boy.
I see a few, I think.
Oh yeah. So it's gonna depend on the process that I'm doing. Like I was gonna show this image here. So like I usually end up with a lot of layers, because especially if I work in 3D, when I export that render, like the render comes with like here, I'll show you. Let's have a bunch of yeah, like the render gives me all these different passes from the render. So like I have like lighting passes, and background, and ambient occlusion, and depth, and normals, and all these different passes that I can actually use for different many things. So if I'm working in 3D and I do like an actual render, I usually end up with a lot, because I get all these passes that I can just sort of layer and create different effects and all that. However, when I'm doing a lot of more photo batching, when I start in Photoshop from scratch, like I usually just start with a lot. Like I start piling on top, and I merge them all when I get to a certain point that I know I'm gonna continue forward. And I keep building, adding more stuff, and then I merge them up, and then I continue to merge them up, and I do it that way when I start from Photoshop. But as you can see here, and I think that's because like coming from the animation business, like there's always gonna be a change. And so whether it's lighting or this building needs to be this way, or this needs to get added or something like that. So keeping layers is sometimes very useful because you can always go back a certain point, a certain stages back, and add the things that you need to add and fix. And it's not gonna be as difficult if you only have like 1 or 2 layers.
Yeah. You're lucky. Nobody on YouTube can actually see this, so you feel free to answer however you want for the next question. Do you name your layers in a sensical way?
Barely. Barely. I mean, I have like a bird's layer here, but I like. And actually this file is way more organized than my normal one, because I actually was doing a little demo like a couple weeks back about this specific image, and I was explaining the whole process, and so I needed to name it just so I knew what I was going to talk about. So I wouldn't have like this bird's layer called birds, and yeah, normally I wouldn't have that.
Thanks for the honest answer.
yeah, I'm not gonna pretend I'm organized with this. So
excellent. Yeah. Well, I think we can go on for hours, and there's still questions coming in, but
I don't mind that.
But I think we've covered a lot, and we answered actually most of the questions one way or the other. So I'd love to wrap this up. It's been a fantastic session. It's been really fun to have you.
Thank you. So can I finish with 2 more points?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
take it away.
Okay, sweet. Let me open up something here. Okay, so and I wanted to mention this because this is like one of my when I learned about this, it was very eye-opening, and it was like when I was doing freelance, but I was struggling a lot with how I could grow more and more. And so a while back, I saw a video from, and I'm probably gonna say his name wrong, but his name is Shadi Safari, I think is what it's pronounced. But he has a video on, and you can Google this and you can get the video and you can actually watch the whole thing. But it's a very extensive video on how, well, he names it the law of increasing awesomeness. So I think it's pretty cool. He talks about how to grow as an artist, and things that you need to do, like very specific stuff. And like I love him because he's very direct with his answers and questions and stuff like that. But one of the things that I was watching that video a while back, and one of the things, and can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. One of the things that he talked about is like, if you are an artist, and I'm just gonna do a crappy drawing here. Let me just do that in red. And this is you here in red, right? And you're standing here in this valley, and you're looking at this mountain, and you're looking at this point here, and you're telling yourself, okay, this is where I'm at, and this could mean I want to be a lead background designer or a lead character artist, or for this specific company. That's your goal, right? And what happens is that a lot of artists think that by just working in terms of like just making pieces and doing art and all this stuff, it's gonna get them to where they're at, right? And in part it is, but what happens is that a lot of artists, they do work and they're sort of doing this. They're doing work and then doing work and then doing work, and they're sort of wandering with a specific mission or a specific set of goals that they need to achieve to get to that point, which is this right here. And they're sort of wandering into this industry or in this art world, and they're not really doing it as effective as possible, or in a way that's going to get them to that point faster and more efficient, right? And so one of the things that he says is that that you need to look at that point, and you also need to look at people that are at that point, right? So you have names here, that is, artists that are already in that spot where you want to be. And one of the things that he says is like, you need to look at what they have done in the past couple of years and what they're doing, and sort of trace and sort of mimic and copy that. And I always try to be careful when saying this, but like at the same time, it's good to say, because like, you probably heard it before. Don't compare yourself to other artists. Like, don't do what other artists are doing. Like, do your own thing, type of thing. But to me, that's like, it could be in some cases, or in a lot of cases, like very dangerous, because what happens is that it doesn't give the artist a clear path to reach the goal that they want to reach. Now, yes, there are a lot of artists that are super unique with their artwork, and they have like a very unique sort of journey that they've gone through, or anything like that, or they want to go through. But in most cases, in most cases, where you want to be, there are already people already doing what you are trying to do, or there are people that have gone through what you're trying to do, type of thing. So it's always good to look at those people and sort of see what they have done, and try to mimic that. And what that means is that, and I'll give you a personal example. That means that look at the software that you're using, look at the techniques that they're using, like be super specific. And I'll give you an example. Maybe about 4 years ago, because of, part of the story that I told you about me, because of that 3D background that I had, like I actually despised 3D. Like when I was doing this concept art thing, I was doing freelance and stuff, like I hated 3D. Like I didn't want to know anything about 3D. I didn't want to do anything about it. And so when I saw this video, like I think a couple months after that, I took a mentorship program with one of my artists, and one of my favorite artists. And when I saw his process, and I took his mentor because I really wanted to do what he was doing, in the way that he was doing, and like have the same sort of portfolio. And when I saw his process, he was like, I mean, he was using 3D like a lot. And I was like, oh, and like the first weeks, it was like very hard for me, because I was just like fighting the use of 3D. But then I realized, okay, you're not gonna become a 3D artist. Like I'm not a 3D artist. I'm gonna use 3D to help my concept art game as a support thing. Like I don't need to become a 3D artist to use 3D for my like personal advantage. And so during that class, it sort of helped me sort of like be at a good place with 3D, where I could say, okay, I'm gonna use 3D for my concept. Like I don't need to become a 3D artist or know all this like super technical things about 3D for me to be able to do concept art and use 3D for it. And so that's like one of the ways that I was applying this this idea of trying to mimic these artists that were at a place where I wanted to be. And the other thing was like, once you get to that stage, just like in any environment, once you get more visibility to even bigger things and other mountains that you can reach, and sort of do the same concept of following a trail type of thing. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel to be in this industry. Like you don't need to create something like super unique to be able to work and live off this industry. And so this sort of concept idea was like super important to me, because like it sort of like helped me open my eyes to like be open to learn all the things that is just gonna supplement what I do. So that was one thing. And the other thing is like and this is gonna be super cliche, but don't ever like don't give up. Like I talk to a lot of artists, and like they're like in their early 20s, and they have tried this for a couple months or a year, and they're like trying to give up. And like that's not a good reason. Like if you have the audacity to think that you want to live off your art, like failing for a year shouldn't be enough of an excuse to give that up. And I'll give you an example. Like when I was starting and I was trying to get clients and live off of this, like I will send emails to many different companies like all the time, like many times throughout the year. And I actually had, I don't think I have it anymore, but I actually had a folder on my Gmail that was rejection emails. And I think I had like over 70 rejected, because I will save them like every time I'll get one. And those are the ones that will actually reply back, because sometimes you apply to someone, you never hear from them. But all the ones that reply, oh, we can't hire you because this and this or whatever, I'll always say that I'll put them in that little folder. And I don't know if it was because I'm a masochist or stubborn or whatever, but I wanted to look at those and see that number grow, because that meant that I was actually trying to get there, right? And I wasn't looking at it as a failure or anything like that. I mean, it was a failure, quote unquote, but it was also like feeding me. And I had like over 65, 70 emails there before I actually had like an actual hireable status. And so I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you so much. And thank you for taking us on this journey and this appropriate picture to depict it. No, it was a great session. I really enjoyed it. It was so full of valuable advice and deep insights in how you got where you are. And I think that's very helpful and inspiring for other people to see there's many ways to move on and to achieve next level. Yes. and grow your skills. Very, very inspiring. Really, really liked it. So thank you very much for this session. Sarah Jean, I think we're...
thank you guys for having me.
Oh, more than welcome. It was great having you. Fantastic. And thanks to everybody out there who joined us for this session and the lively discussion on the chat. We tried to keep up with it and funnel a couple of the questions into the conversation. Sorry if we couldn't address all of them, but I think it was still a very valuable session. Yes, it's only time to wrap up. So follow our presenter on social media. There's lots to see and discover and to learn. He's on Twitter and Instagram and also on ArtStation. If you feel the need to go shopping, then don't forget to claim your 20% discount on the Wacom EU and UK eStore with the discount code MANGA20 during checkout. Yes. That's it for day one of the Wacom Manga and Anime Days. If you like, we meet again tomorrow for a session on mechanical design in Japanese art, and it's going to be pretty fierce what we're going to see there too. So see you then, and good night or good morning, wherever you are. Take a rest, let it all sink in, and keep on drawing.